In the mid-1990s, the video game industry stood at a crossroads. The shift from 2D sprite-based games to 3D polygonal adventures was in full swing, driven by the arrival of powerful new consoles like the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64. Developers scrambled to embrace the third dimension, leaving behind the pixelated artistry of the 16-bit era. Amid this seismic shift, a small team at Konami, led by the visionary Koji Igarashi, crafted a game that defied the trends of its time. A game that would become a legend, not through fanfare or hype, but through its quiet brilliance. This is the story of how Castlevania Symphony of the Night became a sleeper hit, rising from obscurity to redefine a genre and cement its place as one of gaming's greatest masterpieces. It was 1997, and the gaming landscape was dominated by titles like Final Fantasy VII and Super Mario 64. Games that showcased the potential of 3D graphics and sprawling, immersive worlds. Konami's Castlevania series, a beloved franchise known for its gothic horror aesthetic and punishing platforming, had thrived on earlier systems like the Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo. But as the industry pivoted toward polygons, the series faced an uncertain future. Fans expected Konami to follow suit, delivering a 3D Castlevania that could compete with the likes of Tomb Raider or Resident Evil. Instead, the team took a bold gamble. They doubled down on 2D, under the direction of Koji Igarashi, then a relatively unknown assistant director. The Castlevania team chose to refine the series' roots rather than chase the 3D trend. Igarashi, affectionately nicknamed IGA by fans, envisioned a game that blended the series' signature gothic atmosphere with innovative gameplay, inspired by RPGs and exploration-driven titles like The Legend of Zelda. The result was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a game that expanded the linear, stage-based structure of its predecessors into a sprawling, non-linear adventure set within the labyrinthine halls of Dracula's castle. But this bold vision came with risks. Konami's higher-ups were skeptical of a 2D game in an era obsessed with 3D innovation. Development resources were tight, and the project was treated as a secondary priority compared to flashier titles. The team worked under constraints, with a modest budget and a tight schedule, yet their passion for the series drove them to pour their hearts into every pixel, note, and mechanic. Little did they know, their creation would spark a revolution. When Symphony of the Night launched in Japan on March 20, 1997 for the PlayStation, it arrived without the fanfare of a blockbuster. Konami's marketing efforts were minimal, overshadowed by the hype surrounding 3D juggernauts. The game's release in North America later that year, on October 2, 1997, was equally subdued. Compounding the issue was a notoriously poor English localization, riddled with awkward dialogue and mistranslations, most famously, the now iconic line, "What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets." While this campy dialogue would later become a beloved meme, it initially gave critics and players the impression of a rushed or unpolished product. Initial reviews were mixed. Some critics praised the game's stunning 2D visuals, haunting soundtrack by composer Michiru Yamane, and innovative gameplay, which blended action platforming with RPG elements like leveling, equipment, and exploration. Others, however, dismissed it as a relic of the past, criticizing its adherence to 2D in an era of 3D innovation. Sales were modest at best. In Japan, the game sold fewer than 100,000 copies in its first year, and in North America, it struggled to find an audience amid the crowded PlayStation library. Retailers, unsure of how to market a 2D game in a 3D world, often relegated it to bargain bins. For all intents and purposes, Symphony of the Night seemed destined to fade into obscurity, a footnote in the storied Castlevania franchise. But beneath its unassuming launch, a groundswell was brewing. In the late 1990s, the internet was still in its infancy, but gaming communities were beginning to form on forums, Usenet groups, and early websites like Game FAQs. It was here, in these digital corners, that Symphony of the Night found its first champions. Players who stumbled upon the game, often by chance, enticed by its striking cover art or a friend's recommendation, discovered a depth and richness that defied expectations. The game's non-linear castle, filled with secrets, hidden rooms, and multiple endings, rewarded exploration in ways few games of the time did. Its RPG mechanics, allowing players to customize protagonist Alucard with weapons, armor, and abilities, added unprecedented replayability. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Players shared tips about hidden items, like the Cresseagrim sword or the secret reverse castle that doubled the game's length. They raved about Michiru Yamane's orchestral soundtrack, which blended gothic organ melodies with rock and jazz influences, creating an atmosphere that was both eerie and enchanting. The game's pixel art, meticulously crafted by artist Ayami Kojima, brought a dark, romantic beauty to Dracula's castle, with Alucard's flowing cape and hauntingly detailed enemies leaving a lasting impression. As players delved deeper, they realized Symphony of the Night wasn't just a game, it was an experience. Its blend of exploration, combat, and progression felt fresh and addictive, inspiring the term Metroidvania to describe its genre-defining formula. Gamers who completed the game's standard ending, only to discover the inverted castle unlocked by specific actions, were floored by the sheer ambition of it all. This wasn't a game that held your hand, it respected your intelligence and rewarded your curiosity. By 1998, Symphony of the Night had cultivated a devoted cult following. Gaming magazines, initially lukewarm, began revisiting the title as reader letters and fan feedback poured in. Retailers noticed a curious trend. Despite its slow start, the game was selling steadily, driven by recommendations and repeat purchases. Used copies became hard to find, as players clung to their discs rather than trading them in. In an era before digital downloads, this organic demand was a testament to the game's staying power. Konami, initially dismissive of the project's potential, took notice. The game's success prompted a port to the Sega Saturn in 1998, exclusive to Japan, which added new areas and characters, further fueling its reputation. Meanwhile, the PlayStation version continued to gain traction, with fans dissecting its secrets and speedrunners pushing its mechanics to the limit. The game's depth, its hidden bosses, secret items, and multiple endings ensured that even years after release, players were still uncovering new details. The rise of Symphony of the Night wasn't driven by flashy marketing or corporate backing, but by the passion of its creators and the dedication of its fans. It was a game that thrived on discovery, both within its world and in the real-world communities that championed it. By the early 2000s, Symphony of the Night was no longer a sleeper hit, it was a legend. Its influence reverberated across the gaming industry, inspiring a wave of Metroidvania titles that adopted its non-linear exploration and RPG-infused gameplay. Games like Metroid Fusion, Hollow Knight, and Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a spiritual successor led by Igarashi himself, owe a debt to Symphony's groundbreaking formula. Developers praised its elegant balance of challenge and accessibility, while fans continued to celebrate its timeless art and music. Konami capitalized on the game's newfound status, releasing ports and re-releases on platforms like the PlayStation Portable, Xbox 360, and later mobile devices. Each re-release introduced new players to Alucard's journey, and the game's reputation grew as one of the greatest titles of all time. In 2007, a decade after its debut, Symphony of the Night was ranked among the top games in retrospective lists by outlets like IGN and Game Informer, cementing its place in gaming history. The game's success also elevated Koji Igarashi to legendary status. As the steward of the Castlevania series, he helmed several acclaimed sequels, each building on Symphony's foundation. Michiru Yamane's soundtrack became iconic, with tracks like Dracula's Castle and The Tragic Prince still celebrated in gaming concerts and remixes. Ayami Kojima's art defined the series' aesthetic, influencing everything from character designs to fan art. Looking back, the triumph of Castlevania, Symphony of the Night is a testament to the power of vision, craftsmanship, and community. In an era that demanded 3D spectacle, a small team at Konami dared to embrace the beauty of 2D, creating a game that was both a love letter to the past and a bold step into the future. Its modest launch belied its profound impact, as players around the world discovered its magic and spread the word, turning a niche title into a cultural touchstone. Today, nearly 3 decades later, Symphony of the Night remains a masterpiece, a game that transcends its era, captivating new generations with its haunting beauty and endless depth. It is the ultimate sleeper hit, a reminder that greatness doesn't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it emerges quietly from the shadows, waiting for those brave enough to explore its depths.